So here's the questions that you should ask yourself to determine if you're in a toxic relationship. 1, has she ever brought up divorce or separation or anything that involves you guys being apart from each other for a short or extended period of time? Especially if it's in a long-term relationship and it's a really long thing. And I've seen even people that are only dating a couple months go to therapy. Therapy is a complete sham. Therapy isn't going to work for you. That is one of the biggest traps of being in a relationship, is going to therapy, because therapy focuses a lot on the past. How it usually starts is she starts pulling away, she starts fights over simple little things, she starts getting a little bit more distant, maybe she's more independent. I've heard things such as she wants more free time, maybe she wants to hang out with a friend a little bit more, a single friend, maybe she's reaching out to guy friends if you've already allowed that, which you shouldn't. Could be maybe she suddenly wants to get in shape. Maybe she's been pretty average fitness for a while, but now suddenly she wants to get in shape. Could be a lot of different things. Maybe she comes up with a new hobby. Maybe she suddenly starts hiking or loving bike riding or something like that. Now, as adults, people change, but generally when you see these significant shifts in personality, which result in her and you and her kind of like growing apart a little bit, you might be at the start or the end of a toxic relationship. The biggest challenge here is that most men don't see it till it's too late. They don't think it's really a big deal, right? She's tried to make things work with you for a long time, and now she's at the point where she's just given up. She's looking externally. She's looking for maybe new sources of enjoyment. She's looking for, you'll hear this quite often, find herself. If you've seen Eat, Pray, Love with Julia Roberts, this is a very good example of how this kind of works out. She's going to want to go find herself. She might want to take a girls trip. She might want to take a solo trip. Or maybe she disguises this as a business trip, something she wouldn't normally do, but now suddenly she's the type of girl that wants to go on these business trips that she'd never done before. So you're like, that's kind of new, but maybe it's a new position, maybe it's a new job, maybe she changes jobs, maybe she spends less time with the kids, maybe she wants more time with the kids, maybe you guys used to always do things together and now she wants to do things with kids herself. So these are all warning signs on things that might be kind of a little off. Now, does it mean the rug's gonna be swept from out under you? Not necessarily. It's definitely something to be aware of. Chess is such a great analogy because you're just watching her set up her pieces. You're watching and seeing what she's doing. You don't necessarily need to react. You don't need to attack or defend anything just yet. But you do need to be aware of what's going on the board. Now, I've had an experience like this before in a previous relationship where it started with a little bit of distance. Maybe it was like, well, we don't need to see each other every day, And then it was like, maybe we don't need to talk to each other every day. And at this point in my life, full transparency, I was a bit of a simp. I was the nice guy. I was the guy who was people-pleasing and trying to always make things work. But I ignored it. I didn't think much of it. It was kind of one of those situations where it's like, oh, okay, we're a little bit busier. Job, things are going on. There's a lot of different things that can be going on in someone's life that could cause a little bit of distance to grow in a relationship. But it became a little bit more frequent. We spent a little less time together. Now, when they did have free time, like you knew they had free time, they weren't working or had any other obligations, they suddenly had other plans. And suddenly other things start going on. So it's like the distance and all of that stuff starts to increase. A lot of guys, they'll feel it in their gut, right? And this is usually when they start thinking about therapy or when they start thinking about talking to their friends or their mom or whoever their outlet is. In our group, in our Telegram group where we have guys talk about these things, it's usually the group is where they're going to start reaching out and saying, well, you know what, she's been kind of distant lately. And then they need to take an honest assessment and see whether or not it is something to be aware of. If it's, kind of that toxic relationship that's building where you're building that distance and she's separating herself from you, or if it's just a momentary lapse in the relationship. Because relationships aren't always smooth, right? Sometimes we have ups and downs. That's natural. It happens. Where a lot of people end up going at this point is to therapy, especially if it's in a long-term relationship and it's a really long thing. And I've seen even people that are only dating a couple months go to therapy. Therapy is a complete sham. Therapy isn't going to work for you. That is one of the biggest traps of being in a relationship, is going to therapy, because therapy focuses a lot on the past. They're going to bring up all these things that came out in the past. Maybe they're going to dig through all of your past when you should really be focused on what's happening right now. What happened in the past doesn't matter. Even if you had an affair, even if you stepped out on the marriage, even if she stepped out and you chose to stay with her, completely different point. Even if you've been unemployed, even if you've done all of these things, like all of that past stuff doesn't matter. It only matters what you can do right now and moving forward. And this is where therapy really misses, because they focus living so much on the past. The other big miss with therapy is it's very feminine centric. It's very much focused on women, feelings. It doesn't focus so much on the logic side of things. Occasionally you'll find therapists that does, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to be very much focused on the female. And the problem with therapy is people feel like they're actually doing the work. People feel like they're actually doing something because, they're going and they're talking about it, and it's basically two people that get an opportunity to go like yell at each other with a moderator. That's basically what it is. And I don't mean yell, but they get the chance to talk to each other and express their feelings and to express their past. For women, this is actually a good thing because they get to talk, right? They externalize their thoughts. They externalize their feelings. They talk about all this stuff externally, but then it forces men to be external with their thoughts and their feelings, which we aren't so good at. We are better at internalizing things, figuring things out, and then coming together as a unit with your wife or partner or your woman to be able to figure these things out together. But forcing those things out in the open in front of a neutral party, supposedly neutral party, they're not, by the way. But trying to force these things out in the open in front of a therapist, someone who's focused on the past and trauma and attachment theories and all this other BS that they're going to try to throw at you. There's always some new model that they're trying to push out. Depending on which therapist you go to, they're going to be doing different things. Like you could go to 3 different therapists and you're going to have 3 different approaches. It's completely weird, but it's a very good model for females. It's a very good model for the female. And I even encourage some females in relationships to go to therapy themselves. Maybe they need someone to help talk to and organize things, but it can also turn out really bad. It could be a complete sham for the relationship. So if you start getting recommendations for therapy or therapies on the table, it could be signs that you're in a toxic relationship. The next sign is the endless arguments. And I'm going to couple this with the non-argument. So you'll get some people that just constantly argue, right? Every time something little comes up, they're just going at it back and forth. You know what it's like. If you're a guy, maybe you get home from work or she gets home from work and the dishes aren't done or dinner's not ready. Maybe there was clothes left on the ground. Maybe everything else was done, everything else. But then because you had a bad day or because the communication is so broken that you're going to nitpick on that one little thing, right? So let's say you're the man and your wife is home. She's staying home. This is the most ideal situation. But let's say she's staying home. You get home. You haven't gotten in a little bit and you're always a little bit irritable because you're not getting respect and intimacy at home. But she did the dishes, she did the laundry, she took care of the kids all day, she took the dog for a walk, she did your shopping for you, she did a billion other things. Let's assume she had a very busy day. Maybe when she got home, she put her coat on the coat rack and it fell on the floor. You get home and you're a little frustrated, right? Your relationship's not going well because you guys have been arguing a lot. You get home, the first thing you see, what do you see? You see that coat on the floor and you're like, babe, what's going on? Why is there a coat on the floor? And then she looks at you and she's like, what are you talking about? Right? Because she's gonna go back and forth. In her back of her mind, she's like, I did all of this stuff. And he's focusing on just the coat. So on one side, you're saying, why is there a coat on the floor? She's like, who cares about the coat? Right? So this is where the arguments start. And then this is where it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then you'll get more and more arguments over just petty, like insignificant things. Like how easy is it just to pick up the coat and put it on the coat rack? Now, a lot of people are like, oh, that's kind of an extreme example, but you see this stuff all the time. Guys that I coach, I see this all the time about sweating like these small itty bitty little things. Even though she had a very good day and she had a very good day for the relationship and it would have been, a wonderful evening and night together, then it turns into this really bad thing. And it's a cycle of arguments over just petty little things because you have to know what to look for. The next sign is trying to do some sort of long distance relationship. So if suddenly like you guys are living apart and you're separated and trying to work on things, or maybe you've just been dating for a while and you don't see each other all that frequently, long distance will work for periods of time, but it's generally not a good long-term strategy. This can apply to people where maybe the wife and children are living somewhere else and they just come for a couple months at a time, or maybe the husband. I'll use an example with the guys that go crabbing, right? Or the guys that do firefighting. Like they'll be gone for 3 to 6 months at a time and they'll only talk to each other via text when it's in season. And those jobs are great. They pay really well because they know you're kind of sacrificing your life. You're not going to be able to maintain that long-term relationship. So they pay those premiums, 1 for the danger, and then 2 because it's a big sacrifice to life because you're basically giving up 4 to 6 months of your life every single year. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So if she ever recommends any sort of long-term arrangement, that's definitely signs that you're working towards a toxic relationship and you don't want to be there. And the last sign to watch out for is any inklings or any mentions of divorce. So when 2 people are married and they're together, they should be committed to each other. They should be grateful. They're going to go through problems. In a relationship, you have to accept that you're going to have problems. You're going to have fights. But if the first thing every time you guys have a fight, she's thinking about separation or divorce, say if you're in a long-term relationship and every time you guys get into a conflict, she's suddenly all about, maybe we should, take a little break for a while. And that kind of language comes up frequently, or if she drops the divorce bomb, or if she's, starts sleeping in a separate bed, anything that would force you to separate, right? Divorce or separation, then that's signs that she's going to use that as leverage. She's trying to get you to think about the future without her, not in the sense of that she's giving up, but she's going to use it as leverage. And then what happens in this case is it gets really toxic because then if the man really loves his wife or his girl, then he's going to try harder and harder and harder to make sure that she doesn't mention that again. It gets to a really bad place because the guys are always trying to appease her. They're always trying to, make sure that she doesn't even think about divorce. Like, oh, I don't want you to think about divorce. So it's like anything she say and she ties to divorce, he'll do the complete opposite of that thing. He'll be like, oh, I don't want her to think about this thing, right? And this could be, him giving her grief about a very reasonable thing. Like she stayed out late with friends and was drinking and didn't respond, and she didn't show up till like 2:30, 3 a.m. Let's assume there's no infidelity going on. But if he's giving her grief about it, and then she fires back the next morning with, well, maybe we need to separate or just get a divorce because we're a different life. Then next time she goes out, he's going to keep his mouth shut. That's not a good and healthy place to be for any man, right? Because she broke a boundary. she's way out of line there. So she needs to accept that. She needs to own up to it. She needs to apologize, and she needs to not do it again. So what I see a lot with guys that I work with is that they'll get to these places where women are typically initiating most of the divorces or separations. So she'll get to a point where she'll just drop that. And then suddenly he starts reeling and he's like, oh, I'm going to stop doing that thing. And then she'll mention something else will happen, right? Then maybe they'll talk about spending. Maybe they'll talk about money. He'll be like, no, you can't spend that, or you can do that, or right? Whatever it is, some sort of restriction on money or something. And then she brings it up again. So now he's not talking about her partying late. He's not talking about money. He's just letting her get away with all he can. And then it gradually just starts whittling away. And then this is where you start to get into really toxic relationships, because you have one partner, and this can go either way, right? I coach mostly men, so that's why my audience is catered towards men. These situations where of 10 or 20 different things that he never fights back against because he's fearful that she might initiate a divorce or she might talk about it. When in reality, she's probably been thinking about it the whole time. So here's the questions that you should ask yourself to determine if you're in a toxic relationship. 1, has she ever brought up divorce or separation or anything that involves you guys being apart from each other for a short or extended period of time? 2, is she constantly breaking boundaries and getting away with it? Like, are you unable to talk to her about things when she breaks those boundaries? 3, is there any sort of physical separation between you two? This could be sleeping in separate beds. This could be living in separate houses. This could be working jobs that require you to frequently be away. This would even fall in. I've had a client and his wife traveled every other week. Long story short, he comes to find out that she was traveling, but she was also sleeping with her boss. But if there's anything that requires that you two are apart for long periods of time or extended periods of time over a long period of time, it's going to create challenges. The 4th one, is she finding any sort of newfound independence? Like she's trying to rediscover herself. She's trying to reinvent herself. This is common for people as they hit their 30s and 40s, especially if they didn't accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. Just watched How I Met Your Mother last year. It took me like 2 years to finish it. But there was that part when Lily wanted to go be an artist because she felt like Marshall held her back. He didn't allow me to be an artist, and I wanted to be an artist. And then she realized she just wanted to be with him. Now, for most men, I would say don't take her back because you don't know what she's up to out there. Like, just go find someone else. Find someone that wants to be with you and doesn't need to question herself. But he did take her back. Number 4 is like she trying to find some sort of new independence. And then lastly is the argument, no argument. Are you having lots of arguments over like petty little things and you just can't seem to get on the same page? Or are you at the point to where you don't argue at all because you're too afraid to bring things up because she can't handle conflict and she can't resolve conflict appropriately? Now, if this sounds like you and this sounds like a situation that you want to resolve, I have a group of men that I work with and I coach men on a regular basis, and I'd love to talk to you to learn about your situation and see if we can work together to be able to get you on the path that you want to be, chasing your purpose, having an amazing relationship with your girl or your wife. But otherwise, ask those 5 questions and think about where you're at in your relationship.